Thank you for stopping by. Today I'm working on this go-kart. This is a Monster Moto MM80. Haven't worked on one of these before. It was dropped off to me a couple of weeks ago. This was covered with mud all over. These front tires are in excellent shape compared to what the back looked like. And I was asked, could I get this running? Well, first thing I did was open up this gas tank, and it wasn't gas in there, it was straight water. Not only was there water in there, but it was left wide open, so I don't know if it did any damage to the engine. First thing I did was take this tank off, clean it out, put some pebbles in there, some nuts and bolts, shook it up. I did look online for a new tank, but I wanted to see if I could get this engine running first. And by the way, just about every part you could think of, you could get for this go-kart, not the gas tank. After I shook it up with the pebbles and the nuts and bolts in there, I rinsed it out. Then I put this rust remover in there. I have the link for it down below. And I followed the instructions, never used it before. Followed the instructions just the way it said to do it. Other than the pitting that's left behind, it cleaned it right out. I was pretty surprised the way that worked. Next, I went to the carburetor. I thought maybe I could just spray a little carb cleaner in there, clean it out, see if I get it to sputter. Well, when I went to put the nozzle in there, and I took this bowl off, the float wouldn't move. I said, oh, this is probably a shot on the inside. Took the carburetor off, only to find a bottle cap was in there, holding the float open, holding the float down. That'd be in the open position, I'm assuming, to let the gas in. Well, cleaned the carburetor out, cleaned it all up. The gaskets were shot. I don't have any replacement parts for this. So I made some cardboard gaskets, but the bowl gasket was shot. Put it back together, put a little gas in it, and it fired up. Ran poorly because this gasket was shot down here, so it was sucking air. Ran poorly, but it ran. All right. Went online to order the gasket kit for this, and for $8 more, I was able to purchase a whole carburetor with the gaskets. So that's a new carburetor, a Chinese knockoff. I think this whole motor might be a Chinese knockoff anyway, but it starts right up on the first pull. Don't want to tell you what I went through to get these tires on. These were the toughest tires I ever put on a rim. Small tires are always hard to put on, but these were extremely tough. Anyway, I get this running. I can't fit in the seat. I had my grandson Johnny drive it. Oh, another thing, this throttle, I thought we were going to have to buy a new cable, but by spraying it down and letting it sit a couple days and playing it back and forth, I was able to free the cable up. When you stepped on the pedal, nothing happened back here. So we had to take care of the throttle, the gas tank, the carburetor, the tires. Well, Johnny gets on there and he's all of 75 pounds, and this thing flew going down that hill. Problem was, couldn't make it back up the hill. Pushing back up, going back and forth, it barely moved back and forth. What could it be? Pull it up, check the engine out. The engine's running, the RPMs are fine, everything's great on it, but it just won't come uphill. My next step is to remove this panel and to check the clutch to see if this clutch is either filthy, full of oil, or just worn out. So that's where I'm heading to next. It looks like it only has 3 bolts that hold this cover on, and they look like they may need a 10 millimeter, let's say an 8.8. I don't know if that's a millimeter size socket that I'm going to use. So I'm going to get this cover off, show you what I have. Might have to pull this wheel back off again. As a matter of fact, from what it looks like in here, I will have to pull this wheel off again. So once I get this cover off, if I have to pull the wheel off, I will. Either way, I'll be back to show you the next step. All right, we have the cover off. Now, see, this chain has a lot of slop in it, and I couldn't find any instructions on how to get this clutch off. A lot of instructions on how to clean a clutch and so on, but not how to get this off. On some units, they'll have from the clutch directly to the wheel. On this one here, it has this, I forget what we call it, it's a jack. On this unit, we have this assembly here. It looks like it's bolted to the engine, and it has this other sprocket I'll take the chain down to the wheel. I went to their website and I found instructions on how to tighten this chain. You would loosen the motor mounts. There's 2 nuts and bolts back here, 2 in the front. Then you would tighten these nuts up to bring the chain forward to tighten this chain up. But that's not my concern right now. My concern right now is how to get this clutch off. So even if I took this wheel off, I still have this sprocket in the way of this clutch. What I'm going to try and see if it works is to take this bracket off, or to loosen this bracket, and see how much play I have. I know this bolt has to come off. It's 10 millimeter. Now here's something you'll run into. When you go to loosen this bolt, this requires 10 millimeter wrench, you'll see the clutch turning. So to loosen this up, I'm just going to give this wrench a whack with the hammer, and that should loosen it. If not, there's a couple things you could do. You could put a rope down into the piston and tighten it up that way, pull this wheel off and hit it with an impact wrench. But that's not the concern right now. The concern is this clutch getting past this sprocket. So it looks like we have one. There's a bolt back here. There's a bolt back here. I don't know if you can see where my finger is. There's 2. Got an Allen screw in here and a bolt over here. Wonder what the deal is with that Allen screw. That's what I'm going to try, and we'll see if that works. Alright, this is what I found out. It was a lot easier than I thought. I had to give this bolt a couple of wraps to loosen it up because it was spinning. When this bolt comes out, the clutch can slide back and forth. Still have the issue with this sprocket. I removed the bolt that was in here. I loosened this one that was back here. Not sure if that's necessary. But by taking this bolt out, this sprocket will slide on the shaft, and I should be able to wiggle this off, I believe. Let's see, maybe not. I'm showing you this as I'm doing it. I might have to tap this sprocket out a little bit also. I'm not sure now if I have to loosen these bolts, how this is assembled here. I'm really not sure on this. I'm trying to have the camera pick this up. What I did find is when you loosen these bolts, you can slide this plate back, which will tighten this chain. And when you loosen the motor mounts and tighten these nuts up back here, get my finger out of the way, these 2 back here, it'll pull the engine back, but it'll tighten this other chain. So I'm going to go get a rubber mallet, a piece of wood. I'm going to tap this sprocket. Gotta be careful not to bend it, and see. You know what? I think I just might take these screws out and see if it slides that way before I start tapping anything. I gotta be careful not to bend this sprocket and throwing it out. Look how bad this chain is. And it's been a while since I rode motorcycles, and when I used to take my bike out, man, I would never have my chain looking like this. This was definitely neglected, this machine, as far as maintenance. And these clutches have to be oiled from time to time, every so many hours. As I mentioned, I did find an instruction manual online, and I'll see if there's a way I could get that into this video. If you guys out there like me, and we're all the same, who looks at the instructions, but there's maintenance that has to be done on these clutches. Anyway, let me get these screws loose and see if I could pull this forward, and then we'll get into this clutch and see what that looks like, whether it has to be cleaned, replaced, or whatever the case may be. All right, that worked. I pulled out these 6 screws, and this sprocket was able to slide forward. When that sprocket slid forward, I was able to slide this forward, get the chain off, and then the clutch was able to slide right out. Now, a couple of things. We can see this clutch over here. There's a lot of rust on it. It looks like there was some burning going on here too. I'm going to get these tools together because it looks like we might be getting some rain after about 2 weeks of scorching sun. But a few things to point out. I don't know if I had to loosen the screw back here. I don't know what that does. But these bolts over here, I would have had to loosen these up to tighten that chain up anyway. And I'm going to soak this, I'm going to do one piece at a time, the sprocket and chain, in some kerosene. Getting a little pricey. Kerosene's going for like $6.50 a gallon, $6.25 a gallon. When I first started turning wrenches, kerosene was like 18 to 25 cents a gallon. Used to pick it up in a hardware store, bring your own jug in, and you got it for 25 cents. Now, one thing I did notice in here, looks like there's a bushing in there. But I should be able to do it with a pencil or something, line it up and get it back on here. Because this has to go all the way back. Yeah, I don't believe this bolt had anything to do with anything we just did. So we got to get these tools put up. Gonna cover this up. I'm working outside on the back of the trailer, using it as a work table. And if it's not raining, I'll be working on this outside. If it starts to rain, I'll be doing this in the garage. Okay, listen to that. That sounds like a little too much noise. And something that I do see in here, some of these have a bushing, if I remember correctly, and some of them don't. The ones with a bushing, you have to oil them because the bushings absorb the oil. The ones without the bushing, you could put grease in them. I'll see what this looks like in a few minutes. So let me gather this all up and we'll get back to that clutch. You know, I have the cover on now. I'm going to cover this up because I'm leaving it out tonight. But I noticed something when I was turning this to loosen these screws. Every so often it would lock up because this chain was loose and the chain would actually lock. I'm wondering if that was part of the problem and why this go-kart wasn't moving. Maybe it locked between the weight, who knows what other factors, and this chain giving a little bit of a lock might have kept it from spinning the way it should. So now I'm going to look into this clutch and see what we find. I'm still outside, it's not raining yet, and it's cooler out here than in the garage. There's a big old tree. Just laying out this towel so if anything should spring out, it won't go into Never Never Land. Alright, see what we have. We have this clip over here, and you'll need a pair of these to get it out. You can do it without, but this makes, having the right tool makes it so much easier. And like I said, that shot, it hit me and went down. Let's see. You're gonna have to find that. This comes up. Look at this. There's the camera picking that up. Okay, it's a fair amount of rust in here. And there is a bushing in this one. And this bushing looks pretty well worn. As for the clutch itself, okay, this is our problem. Look at this. The best comparison I can make of this clutch are the brake shoes, the old brake and drum, where when you stepped on the brake pedal, the fluid would go to the cylinder and it would push the pads open, and it would press against the drum and it would stop the wheel. This is just the opposite. As this rotates, the faster it goes. These, you have springs in here, and they look pretty. You have a spring in here that's pretty well rusted. We're going to open this up. But what would happen, the faster this goes, these, let's call them shoes, would open up. They would catch onto this drum. They would spin this drum, which would turn the chain, which would turn the wheels. And see this? We have rust here. I don't know what was grabbing, what wasn't grabbing. Okay, I'm going to open this up. What I'm going to do is get some fine sandpaper and clean these up. Hit this with a little brake cleaner. And in here, it's going to take quite a bit of sanding in here. Now, if you're not going to change this bearing, you shouldn't put grease in here. The grease doesn't work well with these bearings. You need oil. Number 30 weight oil, some heavy oil would be good, or any oil that you have. And in here, when I sand it down, I might just use some WD-40. You don't want any grease or oil in here, but the WD-40, that's really not a lubricant. WD-40 is made to displace water, and any lubricant characteristics it leaves behind will burn off real quick on this. Okay, let's open this up. Okay. Take a look at how it goes. Okay. There goes the camera. We have another one of those clips back in here. You see that? All right. Let's see if I can keep this one in the vicinity. Wow. Gonna have to make an adjustment on here and bring these back so they can open up more. Remember I said when you have the right tool it makes it a lot easier? Well, this didn't have the width to spread this ring, and I had to pry this out. I don't know if I'm going to be able to use this. I might be able to flatten it out in the vise. But that said, it's off. It took a while there. And this is what we're looking at. The spring, I'm going to be taking this spring out, and I'm going to be taking all these pieces out and cleaning them up. I don't know if this was the problem or not. You can see this over here. It's how uneven that is. I don't feel any lip over here. So I'm going to pull this apart, clean it up, clean up this drum, and put it back together. I was going to come back after I put this together, but I just wanted to show you the amount of rust that's in here. Look at this. Now, these shoes are supposed to be able to slide out and slide back. When the clutch is spinning at whatever RPM it takes for it to pull out, these are supposed to pull up and then go back. Now, look at the back of this. Look at the plate that it's supposed to be sliding on. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to spend some time cleaning these up. Got to be careful too when you're cleaning this down. Just like the brake shoes on the car, you don't want one side to be down more than the other. So just lightly buff it. This is all burnished. Burnished? Is that it? Burnished over here? This might be the reason why that go-kart wasn't going, because this was just slipping. It wasn't grabbing anything. And there were times, even with low RPM, that the wheels were spinning. So I'm thinking this might have pulled out, just like a caliper on a car pulls out, it gets stuck, and it's not going back, and the wheel's still spinning because this can't slide back and forth the way it should. Just wanted you to see what you may find in here. I'm going to clean this up, put it back together. If the go-kart moves better than it was, but not well enough, I'm going to call the people up, see if they want a new clutch. If it moves the way it should, then we'll leave this as is. Alright, I finished sanding these down. I cleaned them up. You can see the difference. I got most of the rust off the spring, and these are fairly clean. Now, when I go to assemble this, I have it between these two bricks, so you can use a couple pieces of 2x4, because with this bottom piece it rolls and it's hard to get these back on with the spring. I did a dry run before and this was the best way to do it. I cleaned these up with the brake cleaner, and now before I assemble this, I'm going to use this brake grease on it. And the reason I'm using this brake grease is because it's for high temperature, and rather than use regular axle grease, I'm going to be using this. I'll be putting it on the bottom along this lip, each one of the lips. That's so these shoes can slide back and forth, and maybe it'll keep it from rusting up again. Because of the grease and the mess that's involved, I'm going to be doing this off camera, not to get the camera full of grease. I'm going to assemble this clutch, clean off the sprockets and chains, and reassemble it, and then reassemble it onto the go-kart. Alright, you can see I have it together now. I had the sprocket cleaned up. I cleaned these chains the best I could. There's a lot of rust on these chains. This one, rust all up in here. I soaked it in kerosene for a while, cleaned it up with a toothbrush, and spent a little time on it. Really tried cleaning it up, but you have these links like this. So I don't know how long this chain's going to last, especially if it's going under some heavy use, but it's what we have now. I tightened this up. There should be about a quarter inch to a half inch of play on the chains. This one here is still a little too sloppy. It slipped as I loosened this bracket up, slid it over, and it just slipped back a little bit. Now, if you look at the directions I uploaded a few frames back, you would take this bolt out, and right in here, there's the C-clip. Where that C-clip is, you would put 3 to 4 drops of oil in every couple hours of use. Does anybody do that? I don't know. Definitely wasn't done here. Get some grease on this chain, get the cover back on, get it off this trailer, let the little guy take it for a spin and see if it's going to go up and down the hill. Give me a couple of minutes and we'll see how that goes. Turn it around, John, come down. Okay, that's the best I'm going to get this running. So that's a wrap. That's the best I'm going to get this running. If you enjoyed this video, let me know by giving it a like. If you have any questions, post them down below. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe. And not to miss my new videos as I upload them, hit that bell notification. Until next time, stay safe.